Hey there. With us approaching the apex of the Atlantic hurricane season, we currently have a tropical wave moving off the coast of Africa. Ahead of it lies a great swath of fuel for it to potentially become something formidable. Whether or not we get direct impacts from that is yet to be seen. Alongside that, we have some changing weather patterns back at home, and we will go over all of this in today's video. My name is Eric, and if you're new here, I am an aspiring meteorologist, storm chaser, photographer, among many other things. Currently working towards my atmospheric science degree in college. I want to take this time to say, if you do like this kind of content, consider subscribing and leave a like if you end up finding this video helpful. Today is September 1st, 2025. It's a lovely Labor Day afternoon. We're actually getting some showers here in southeast Texas, as we have been over the weekend. For us, some of that slow weather kind of died off as we had a lot of high pressure dominating most of the eastern United States, really most of the United States, and we saw kind of a spin down in weather. But now things are starting to pick up. In the tropics, we have one of those usual waves moving off of Africa, and now that we are on the first day of September, we are moving into the peak of hurricane season, and any of these waves that emerge are definitely worth watching. So looking at the wave here, you can see we have essentially what is just a big jumbled, disorganized mess of thunderstorms. It moved off the coast of Africa yesterday. What the center of circulation is supposed to be is about right here. This is about where the center of convection is, probably a bit more like in here. There is a 50% chance over the next 7 days for it to become a tropical depression as it moves westward and then west-northwestward. Looking ahead at what this wave has to work with, we still have some pretty warm sea surface temperatures across the Atlantic. Of course, where in what was Aaron's wake, there is this area left behind where there is a bit cooler water, but out here in the tropical Atlantic, as well as especially the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, you have some pretty warm surface temperatures, and there is also a lot of heat content that goes deep into the ocean. If you have really deep ocean heat content, then it's going to have more to work with. It can have more heat to draw up instead of it just taking what's from the surface and then essentially running out. Now, while it is too far out to say exactly where this thing is going to go, models still currently show it potentially doing something similar to what Aaron did, being more of a fish storm, but again, it's still too far out to say, and we don't even have a tropical depression yet. But it shows it taking more of a trajectory like this, instead of staying southward and taking it into those warmer waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. But that is still a possibility, and like I said, too far out to say to know exactly where this is going to go at this point. Best forecast is 3 to 5 days out, and by that point, it will probably be somewhere out here. But we will actually go ahead and take a closer look at the model runs. So you can see the wave that we currently have emerging off the West African coast, and as you can see, it eventually forms into a tropical depression, tropical storm, going into mid to late this week. And it continues actually pretty early on, is expected to stay going more northwest. And whether or not it becomes a formidable storm, like I said, is still uncertain, but you can see it's the GFS is expecting it to go east of Bermuda. That's kind of scary right there. You can already see it's already throwing what ends up pretty quickly being a pretty strong system, but this is so far out that this exact scenario is not likely. Looking at the Euro model, you can see it coming up, and it has it kind of actually going further west and then suddenly being yanked off to the east there before it even hits Bermuda. Now, I want to emphasize, looking back at the GFS model here, anything beyond the current frame that I am showing, which shows it actually a week from now on Monday, September 8th, this is about where the storm is expected to be. Anything beyond this frame for this run, this forecast model, becomes significantly less reliable, and especially when you get into like these hours here, everything is pretty much just, it's not likely to play out this exact way. But as you can see, the National Hurricane Center has it taking that west to somewhat northwestward track over the next 7 days, potentially. Anywhere within this area here, it's expected to develop. As I said, still uncertainty as exactly to where it's going to go. Models long-term show it going out to sea, being a fish storm, but it's still worth watching because it's just so far out that we just don't know for certain. Generally, you can see it continues a west-northwestward track until it gets caught by the trade winds and then starts heading north. Again, that's still showing in later forecast hours. So now we'll get a more detailed look at important factors behind what will steer the storm and allow it to intensify to whatever strength that it makes it to. Just yesterday, the National Weather Service had this below a 40% chance of forming, but as of the new advisory, as you can see, it shows it above 40% chance. So over the 7 days, 50% chance. By the time 7 days goes by, this will be somewhere near the Windward and Leeward Islands, and whether or not it even gets relatively close to that is still uncertain, and it seems like it's going to make that turn out towards the sea. And then another 7 days beyond that, if it were to get close to the United States, then it probably would be somewhere within the Gulf. So we're looking at, 2 weeks from now, if this storm ends up doing anything, then we're not going to see something for another probably 2 weeks, as it takes time to develop and trek its way through the sea. All right, so looking at wind shear here, upper level wind going past today, you can see the system moving off of Africa. Looking here, you can see the likely position of the system on Wednesday, and something to note is that there is upper level diffluence happening, which will allow for whatever system that forms to breathe. Essentially, that anticyclonic, basically upper atmosphere, or more like mid to upper level, going into the stratosphere. You have fanning clockwise anticyclonic motion of winds, which is what allows counterclockwise motion on the surface to come in and replace that and feed the storm. And this right here is usually a sign that something organized and considerable is going to form. And it does have some shear surrounding it, but as it continues on, it does kind of begin to generate its own little field, although it does kind of combat some shear. It looks like a lot of this is probably going to work at least somewhat in its favor, but it's once it gets up there, it pretty much abdicates most of that shear, especially as it moves northward. And looking at moisture content, you can see again it emerging presently off the coast of Africa, and then as it makes its way west, it begins to actually generate a pretty solid moisture field, and kind of starts to combat some dry air that tries to make its way on the southern side of the core, and it continues to do that. And this is actually probably what's going to keep it from rapidly intensifying anytime sooner on. But then once it starts to make its way northward, it starts getting its act together again, and it develops a pretty strong closed off moisture field. I think a big influencing factor here is the Saharan air layer. We still have a lot of that kind of trying to choke out some of these systems. You can see some of that coming off of the northern part of West Africa. That's essentially what that is, and it makes its way, by the time the storm starts making its northward turn, some of that makes its way into the system, and you can see it's kind of gets sandwiched. Even whenever it becomes pretty well organized, it gets sandwiched between a lot of that. So dry air is bad for these storms, and a lot of that actually, while you do get a lot of these tropical waves that come up and brew off the coast of Africa, you also do get a lot of this dry air that can also be the antithesis, I guess, if you want to say, of what a hurricane is. So if we continue to see the trend with this dry air, it will prevent it from becoming something particularly strong. And then hopefully the weakening Bermuda high will keep it further east and keep it a fish storm. But again, too far out still to be certain about that. All right, I know this looks like a mess. I know there's a better way to view this particular system with the ensemble, but I don't remember how to do it. I'm kind of just on a time crunch here. But basically this system you see right here is what we're looking at, and these are the different plots that show where it's going. You can see a few show it going a little further south, kind of similar to what Aaron did, but most seem to kind of agree that it's going to go somewhere around Bermuda or east of Bermuda. You can see, looking at the Euromodel ensemble, the models kind of agree a bit more that it'll get closer, it'll track closer to the Caribbean. Now, the European model does tend to be more accurate long term with some factors, but that's not something to be alarmed over. I mean, still a good bit of the models here agree that it will start turning northward sooner, but this is a reason to just keep an eye. It is still possible that it will stay more south and track more westward rather than making that north turn. But basically, what we're looking at is just a storm with definitely relatively good potential when it comes to contributing factors, but we'll just keep an eye on exactly where it tracks. There are some prohibiting factors like that dry air and wind shear, but if and when we do see a system form off of this, which will likely be sometime within the next 7 days, we will get our next named storm, Gabriella. I'm pretty certain is what it is, Gabriella or Gabrielle. But once Gabriella forms, we will just continue to keep an eye on it, and I will keep you updated. That's not all that we have going on. Of course, we have some patterns trending back at home, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. So here we are back at home, and we're going to take a look at current forecast maps and charts. So jumping back a little bit, this is actually from the 26th to the 27th of August. You can see we did have that lingering frontal boundary that did spawn a few areas of thunderstorms going into this weekend, and that's actually kind of what we experienced here in Southeast Texas, and it kind of actually made things a little cool, although pretty humid, so not much better. And we were and still are seeing what's left of that trough that dipped in from the mid-latitudes and brought us some cooler weather. And this is currently present conditions. As you can see, we actually have another stationary front out here in the Gulf and the some of the Atlantic east of Florida. Most things are pretty calm, and today here in Texas, we've just been getting some simple rainstorms. Yesterday was a bit more messy. I heard some thunder. Had a few isolated thunderstorms, but nothing severe. We did have some flooding around Houston, and we do have flood advisories, I think, in Montgomery County. So overall, the previous weather patterns have brought some rainstorms to the southern plains and the Midwest, as well as into Florida and Georgia. Going forward, we're mostly going to see some pretty tame weather, but still some scattered local isolated thunder or rainstorms throughout the southern plains and then going into the eastern United States. But high pressure dominates most of the eastern seaboard as well as the west, and that stationary front stays over. The Gulf actually really doesn't move at all. It's just, like I said, it stays as what it is. It's just a stationary front. You can see here today, this is present conditions. We still have that trough here over the eastern United States, which is bringing in some slightly cooler air to the eastern seaboard and the northeast and some of the central plains. Probably pretty average temperatures at this time of the year around Texas and the deep south. But going into September, you can see another trough actually makes its way in, and it's actually a pretty strong low pressure system that will bring this pretty strong swath of cool air into the Midwest and the eastern United States again. So these are the current temperature anomalies. As you can see, some places are seeing pretty cool weather, actually, especially in the central plains there, and then the east even. And even here in southeast Texas over Houston, we see we're 3 degrees below average temperature. Going into September, all the way up to the 3rd is what I currently have available. It shows the east seeing some pretty lower end temperature anomalies. which is going to feel pretty nice, and it's going to be a continued relief for us as we've been dealing with this summer heat. September is finally when you start seeing things cool down, and for those of us in Texas, especially Southeast Texas, you really don't start to see dramatic effects from that until like end of September, October, and even then it can still be pretty hot, which sucks. See, even today, we're actually seeing some lower maximum highs over even the deep south, which is honestly that's great. I mean, 88 degrees for where I'm at right now. That's actually pretty good for this time of the year. And even places up like in the Midwest, the Central Plains, you're actually seeing some pretty cool weather. 69 is the high in like parts of Nebraska, and you got southeast Minnesota 76. So that's a sign that fall is on its way, and we're already getting to experience some of that, which is just fantastic, if you ask me. And then max temps go back up again starting tomorrow, and minimum temperatures are pretty typical. But once we start getting into September 3rd, and we start seeing that system move in, we start seeing it cool down a bit again. And these are minimum temperatures, and you can see even in places like Texas, you see like slightly below minimum temperatures based on what I usually observe this time of the year living here. Even in places like Minnesota, I mean, you're seeing 42 degrees. Potentially some places, closer to Canada and up in the Great Lakes might even see temperatures into the 30s Fahrenheit. And then around that region, around the Great Lakes, you can see max temps stay at 61, and the minimum temps look about the same going into September 5th. And September 6th, I mean, pretty much we're starting to see some essentially nicer weather, especially for the Midwest area. As you can see, going into that event, that low pressure system might bring some precipitation into the Midwest, and then going into the Northeast. That will be associated with the jet stream and a frontal system, so that will probably bring at least some rainstorms in that area, and that will track further east. So overall, while we'll start feeling cooler, you might see some rainstorms across the Midwest going into the east, maybe a little bit the southern plains. But overall, things will still be pretty tame and cool, which is going to be really nice. So that's pretty much the scoop on that. The scoop. I don't usually say that. It's weird. I'll continue to monitor the tropics for that tropical wave as it continues west, and I will probably provide another outlook update in 2 to 3 days on local weather. And yeah, of course, as always, I hope that you found this video helpful and informative. If you like weather content, as well as some gaming content and vlogs and other things like that, some philosophical essays, consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. And if you could leave a like on this video, I would also be grateful. And with that said, I will see you next time. Take care. Stay safe out there.